Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast. Very fortunate today to have David Charles on the line, who is a veterinary surgeon, ex-ABS president, a Bristol graduate, but I never hold those sorts of things against people. So, David, welcome. That was a Liverpool joke. There's always a bit of rivalry between the schools, but I'm now losing count of how many there are. So that will become more and more difficult, won't it?
Yeah, you're going to say the numbers going up, but it's always nice to have a bit of the rivalry, isn't it? And in my opinion, Bristol's clearly the best.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course we've gone to opening new vet schools. I was at Keele. I think you were as well, weren't you, at Keele opening about a month ago? And a fabulous new building. Seems to be a really good curriculum that they're putting together. I think they're in their third year now. And of course, part of that was because we're not getting as many vets coming across from Europe because of Brexit. I know as part of your job, you're also seeing a massive increase in the number of certificates and things for veterinary involvement, for passing food and things. Tell us a bit about that, and how did you get involved in that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally did mixed practice when I graduated 2019. So I was doing farm and small animals, and there was a big push kind of late 2019 to get all the kind of as many OV qualifications as you could, because we knew once Brexit went through, we'd be doing a lot more export health certificates and those sorts of things, to the extent that all the OV courses were free as well. So I got quite a lot of the panels then, and then I moved to my current practice where I've done just farm since May 2020. And because I came in with my panels and I'd done some livestock and some product exports before, when we got to tail end of 2020 and we knew how things were going to look a bit more, we had a lot of companies approach us. I think they were talking to DEFRA, and DEFRA were saying, these are the vets in your area that are signed up on the new system to do the exports. Obviously, it's all online now, which is good because we don't have to sort of photocopy and fax these things off to Carlisle anymore. It's all online. But we do a lot of product exports. I think we probably, as a practice, probably bill over 20 hours a week of product exports every week. To the top of my mind, I can think of 4 or 5 clients where we're there every week, and then we've got a couple of other companies that do pet food and things where it's more kind of ad hoc. We've got a fishing bait company that exports fishing bait at the start of the season to France every year, and ultimately they don't have a choice now, so they have to have a certificate to move those products. And I mean, it's been good for farm practices. It's another good strong supply of income, but also it's actually, I think it's quite helpful. Yeah, I think it's quite helpful for vets because I think it helps you understand the whole system and supply chain a bit more, so that then when you're on farm talking to farmers, actually you can see the bigger picture maybe in a different way to if we weren't doing any of that side of things as well. And obviously it's got huge human and animal health benefits as well for us to be there and doing those veterinary checks.
I have to pick you up on something. When were DEFRA still using faxes?
So when 2019, you could scan them and email them, or you could fax them over if you wanted. And it was to the extent that they used to be on a particular cream coloured paper so that they could tell if it was the original copy and things as well. So now you just log in through your government gateway, and it's so much easier and it's faster. But they needed that because they knew the sheer amount of work everybody was going to be doing was going to go up loads. I mean, I can think of at least 2 or 3 of the corporates who have their own effectively export arms because they know there's just kind of that much work out there.
These certificates I was reading and stuff have gone up, thousands of % over the last 2 or 3 years, haven't they? And I suppose COVID has helped to digitally transform a lot of businesses. Obviously, Brexit added into that. So making it fully digital just made sense. I know when I deal with America, sometimes they still ask you to send a fax, and I say to them, well, I'm going to really struggle because I haven't really got a fax machine. You know, it's kind of very much 20th century technology, isn't it, with the website and everything now. Well, moving on, I think, you know, obviously I first met you as AVS president. That sounds like it was a really interesting gig. You know, you were obviously at a lot of things. It's a real baptism into the profession. You understand kind of how the profession works from maybe at the higher level, at the conference level, at, you know, meeting officers from BVA and places like that. What were maybe a couple of the highlights from AVS presidency? What do you remember most fondly about it?
Yeah, you know, that feels like a huge amount of time ago, I guess, with COVID having happened since, and the sheer amount of stuff that you learn kind of in your first years and doing the certificate. But some of the notable things, definitely, I ran the first ever student run session at London Vet Show in 2018. I think that was a real personal highlight, but also I think that has opened a lot of doors and a bit of a legacy almost for AVS. They've been able to be involved with Vet Show every year since as a result, and it was a real good chance. It came off the back of some resources and checklists that we'd surveyed vets in practice and students to help improve kind of structure and experience on EMS. We published an EMS experience paper and things as well, but actually the important bit for that with me was it wasn't just about producing something and talking to students. It was important to go and talk to the profession as well, and that's why I got the session with Vet Show, and I'm lucky that I'm actually back talking at Vet Show about something totally different this year. It's a nice relationship that's come out of that, but also with AVS, I got the chance to be involved with VDS training. So that's where I met Ebony, and we set up a number of grants to help students access some placements and things as well, which still run. And then I was involved at the ground stages of the Graduate Outcomes Project, sitting on groups there with the Royal College in what became the Vet GDP and some of the reviews of the day one competencies. And I think it's something that I look back on really fondly, my time on AVS, because it's a student organisation that's looked on really fondly by the majority of the profession, and the fact that RCVS and Vet Schools Council go out of the way to consult and listen to the student representatives, I think speaks volumes about the profession and how much we are always investing in and thinking about the next generations coming through as well. So I think also I met you, I met a lot of other people, and it's opened various other kind of doors for me personally as well. And I've had some really good opportunities since as well. And when I again talk to students, it's something I always encourage them to get involved in. Because the skills that you pick up are going to help you for most of your career.
It was interesting you were talking about the VDS training, because I think when people qualify now, and certainly if there are issues, quite often it's not about, they didn't know how to do a bitch spay or a cat spay, but it's actually those, as we call them, soft skills, communication skills, which obviously the VDS training is helping with. So has that been a big plus? How many sort of scholarships do the students get from the VDS training, for the students perhaps listening in?
Yeah, so I know it's evolved since I sort of started doing it in 2018, but when we set them up, we funded 6 for various 2-week placements. But since then, subsequent AVS presidents have been involved in setting up. VDS now has like a student club, and they have far more involvement with students to really kind of reinforce kind of the value of the soft skills. And I think it's difficult. I think when you're at vet school, there's so much to learn, and the pressure people always feel is on learning all the clinical stuff and really sort of looking in those skills as well in the day one competencies. But actually, I read a paper recently in the Vet Record from some of the farm clinicians at Bristol, so people like Sarah Bailey, Sarah Wood. They'd done a Delphi study of farm practitioners about the skills that they actually wanted new graduates to have when they came to join, compared to what students thought they'd be expected to do. And I think this is really important, that students understand that very much. If people hire a new grad, very much the profession is seeing that as an investment, and that they will train them and things. And almost the best thing you can do is to be as good as you can at the kind of the essentials. So taking a good history, active listening, communicating well, communicating professionally. Clinical exams probably by far your most important clinical skill. And I know we've got a webinar coming up on that, I think, haven't we, for sheep and things, because then that's where the VDS training side is so good. I think that they really champion the non-clinical skills. I think I'd rather call them than soft skills.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's just as important. And actually, as you say, normally that if you're gonna find a problem, normally it's probably about how you communicated or what you did or didn't say, rather than probably what you actually did.
Yeah, no, exactly. And obviously, through that, obviously AVS involvement, how vets are finding it when they come into the profession. We'll have to talk about that thorny issue of retention. It is that sort of stat. Is it becoming a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that we say to people, well, after 5 years, some of you will have left. We look at some of the forums and they can be a bit negative. Are we in danger of actually making the profession sound worse than it is? Because, obviously there are some really not great stories. And, when I qualified, I had, 2 years which were difficult for me. But, I managed to get through, and I was determined, to enjoy my career, because it was something I'd wanted to do since I was 8. So how are we standing on that? Do you think is that going to be an area that improves, and how can we maybe help in that improvement? What are your tips? Maybe coming from that side of a young graduate, if I can call you that.
I'm glad you still think I'm young. So that's good. I'm 30 this year, so but absolutely, so my year, we're 4 years graduated now, and yes, I've got some friends that aren't in clinical practice anymore. I guess part of the question becomes on how you view retention. So are we retaining somebody that is using their degree but is a veterinary advisor in the field for a pharmaceutical company, for instance? Or are we saying that we're not retaining somebody if they're just not in clinical practice? So I've got some friends that are now working for vet schools and things as well, and that obviously has huge reach and huge benefit for the profession, because they are encouraging the next people coming through. But yes, I've also got friends that aren't working in anything that's sort of veterinary or veterinary adjacent. I've got a couple of people from my year didn't go into clinical practice at the start and did various things. I do agree with you that there's maybe a bit of a not a problem, but a bit of a challenge perhaps that we have, where we talk about it and we mention a lot that people may well not stay in the profession for that long. But I think, again, we need to maybe look at how we're quantifying that and actually say, is it just that they're not staying in clinical practice, and actually we do need vets to go and do other things as well.
But obviously, David, I've done that. I had sort of 20 years in practice, then a further 6 just doing my dermatology along with webinar vet, and I still consider myself very much a part of the profession. I do an occasional shift to help a couple of practices out, but broadly I'm not in practice anymore. But I absolutely agree with you. I think we obviously need to have vets going to work at university, going to work in the pharmaceutical industries, to make sure that animal welfare is top of the list of these companies. Obviously for them to go out and give technical advice to out in the field. So we have to look at it holistically, don't we? But I suppose for me the retention is if they actually are no longer involved in any aspect of veterinary. Would be a lot to be like a churn.
I think for me, the other thing that was becoming really apparent to me in the last sort of 12, 18 months recently, since I've been in practice, is some of the problem, I think, is there's no clear sort of roadmap or progression, perhaps, potentially. And in a way, I think that's good, because you can very much shape your career how you want. But I think now that we know that such a huge percentage of graduates are going to join a graduate scheme, which is very structured, year one, possibly years 1 and 2, it's interesting to see how practices, corporates are dealing with supporting people once you come off their graduate scheme. Some of that structure's gone, and I guess supporting people make the next steps. So I know I've always been quite interested in the business and business development side as well, but it is interesting that there's not a particular roadmap or necessarily progression route to get to clinical director and some of those other kind of opportunities. And now that we are, and I think it is good, I think we're moving away from a view that everything, whether it's salary or promotion or whatever, comes with years qualified. I think we are maybe moving more towards looking at the skills people can bring and experiences, which is good. But also, I think once you hit 3, 4, 5 years qualified, you do start thinking, okay,
what's next?
Where might this lead me? What's next? Because you've nailed all your year one skills in your first year. Second year, you're really getting confident with everything, and then you start to think, okay, am I interested in management? Is this something I might want to do down the line? Do I want to do a certificate? Do I want to do an internship? And I think that kind of, not that there should be one clear route that you have to go on, but I think there could be more work done to look at sort of road mapping and talking about how you can get to various places, or these are the kind of skills that you need. And there were 9 million different ways you can collect them. But actually, I feel like quite often it's a bit hands-off and a bit like, okay, we've got a clinical director there. We don't need to think about who's coming through in that practice, because we've got a clinical director and we'll worry about that problem when they retire. But if there's no progression, that's also very easily when people leave. And and it's interesting, some practices now, I saw a farm practice that a friend works at, they are clearly thinking about this, because they've gone out to recruit for a assistant clinical director as a new job that they've not had before, with a view that they would take somebody who doesn't have all the skills to be a clinical director, but they will work with the current clinical director over the next 2 to 4 years, let's say, and then that CD might retire, because they were a partner that sold the practice however many years ago. And that, I think we need to look at that more, because I feel like sometimes we are victims of a system that will offer you leadership training or management training once you've got the job and you are a clinical director, but actually there's an argument of, shouldn't we train people before they get the job so that they don't crash and burn when they take it?
I think it's a really good point, because obviously doctors have much more of a structured progression, if we use doctors as probably a similar example. But then I suppose also, if a doctor says, I'm going to go for 2 years in Australia, my experience speaking to them is that's often frowned on, because they're then losing their position and so on. So as you say, it's a pro and a con, isn't it? And I always talk, in a sense, with veterinary, it's always been good. You can, as you say, almost make your own curriculum once you qualify, and perhaps moving on, finally, your curriculum has veered more towards sheep than mine did. Although I must admit, I used to love doing the lambings and things, so it is something I miss, around Easter and things. But that's obviously an area that you got interested in, and you're in the process of doing your Cert AVP at the moment. But I know obviously you've done a few webinars for us, which have been well received. And I have to now be careful, because of course every webinar that is on the internet at the moment is talking about AI, meaning artificial intelligence. But of course you're into a slightly different AI, aren't you?
Yeah. So I set up Midlands Advanced Breeding Service in 2021, and we do AI as in artificial insemination, and that was for me, a really good example of what you can do as a farm practice by listening to kind of the farmers that you work with and the nice level of involvement that you get with their businesses. A lot of clients were sort of asking about it, some pedigree, some others, and then I have an interest in business development. I went away, did the research, wrote a business pitch, and pitched it to IVC to invest and help me set up the service, and that also then gave me a level of progression and sort of, you know, managing that service, but also, you know, not many people offer laparoscopic artificial insemination of sheep, and so it is nice that it's a real USP, and it's something that absolutely, I think, also brings in other sheep clients to our practice. And then I grew the service to incorporate semen analysis, pre-breeding exams, synchronization advice, and the other big thing in farm vetting at the moment is growing what we can do with VETtechs. And you know, I've been able to bring in a VETtech service there, looking at application of synchronization devices and things for farmers, because it's normally in the summer when the farmers are really busy. So if we can bring out techs that aren't as expensive as vet on an hourly rate, it's win-win for both our practice and the farmer. But yeah, it's really interesting to look at what we can do with advancing the breeding season, looking at improving scanning and lambing percentages as a result, and also what we can do in terms of kind of genetic kind of improvement as well. And I think we are now getting nearer with Ram Compare and some of the other things that we could look to get nearer to what we've been doing with the dairy industry, with looking at PLIs and EBVs in a totally different way in the sheep side, because we're starting to get more of that genetic data from the rams, and with AI as well. I think there are some real opportunities that SeatWorks sometimes has felt like it sometimes lagged a bit behind what farm vets have done on the dairy. I think the focus has always been dairy side, and it's been nice to be in what was still is a big dairy practice, but to really bring on the sheep side, grow that side of the business, engage the clients as well.
How many AI services, you know, in the country just for sheep?
Just for sheep, under 10 probably.
So it's very much, as you say, the dairy has been much advanced on that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, and the thing that probably lets us run it as well to an extent, is it has to be done by a vet. So we've not got companies like Genus or CMET being able to go around, operate out of the back of a van and go and AI huge amounts of clients across the country very quickly. And also, I guess farmers can't do it themselves. So a lot of our cattle clients, what we're doing is we're running AI training courses and training the farmers to AI their own cattle, whereas, you know, that's not something that they can do with sheep, but we're also helping them synchronize. And also, you know, the latest study showed that about 26% of rams actually fall into this subfertile or infertile category. And for me, the other massive growth is what we're doing to better understand semen quality, how likely successful rams are at achieving the targets that they should be in things. And I think it's making people look at the more joined up picture rather than, oh, well, I just put the tups in on bonfire night and then we'll scan and then we'll lamb what we will lamb. Actually, you know, looking at what we can do to improve lambing and scanning percentages. And I think the benefit is touching lots of wood. While the lamb price is quite good, it's a good time for us to be going out and talking to farmers about what they can do to improve fertility in their flocks, because they're going to see any investments pay off because the price is good. And we also know that if they lamb early, they might get as much as 21% more than conventional lambing. So if 5% of that extra 21% goes on synchronization or advancement, they're still making an extra 15%.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And this is where it's nice, you know, from a biz dev perspective, you know, you talking about you wanted to get more involved in business, and business is all about metrics, whatever you are selling. But obviously, with the veterinary side, we've got that little bit of a pastoral care for the animal as well, I suppose, haven't we?
Yeah, Absolutely, and it's nice that you can balance the two. It's definitely why I really enjoy working in the livestock sector, because yes, I get to go and do the individual animal welfare, kind of disease treatment side, but I also get to sit down with clients who might lamb 1,000, 4,000 ewes and look at the bigger picture and the data, and as you say, the metrics and the benchmarking, because I really like that side as well. And that is where you feel like you are having a business to business relationship and really improving, benchmarks, and therefore that farm business's profitability, which is the other side that I really enjoy, as well as the individual animal side. It's nice to have this opportunity to get involved in both.
David, as always, it's great to listen to you. Those of you who perhaps haven't heard David's talks, do go over to the webinar bets. We'll make sure that we put those links on. If you remember, obviously we'll be able to see those. Otherwise, do speak to us about access or buying them as individual webinars. But it's always good to have you on, David, and to chat to you. I'm speaking to David just before London, not London Vet Show, BVA Live. Oh my goodness, so many conferences and names. Are you at BVA Live, David?
Yeah, I'm going down. Obviously, I was lucky to be named on the 30 under 30 list last year, so they've invited the whole 30 under 30 cohort along to BVA Live as well. So yeah, it'd be nice to network and meet a few faces there as well.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we will see each other then. But thank you so much for speaking to me. Thanks everyone for listening. This is Anthony Chadwick, and this has been another episode of VETchat. Take care. Bye-bye.